Okay. Am I unmuted? I am. All right. Well, it's 6 o'clock. I think we've done enough of these now that we're going to jump right into it. We'll get started here. This is Jake Leon, the Director of Communications for the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you for joining us tonight for the fourth information session on the proposal to build a forensic psychiatric hospital adjacent to New Hampshire Hospital. As with the previous information sessions, we're going to hear updates tonight from representatives from New Hampshire Hospital and the department and the New Hampshire Division of Public Works. Before we get started, a few reminders or tips for new attendees. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on the DHHS website. If you have concerns about this recording, we ask you to disconnect now. All lines except for the presenters will be muted. So if you attendees have questions, please submit your questions in the question and answer feature, the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen in Zoom. That if you enter them there, then your question will be addressed before the night is over. If you have any technical issues or problems with accessing the recording, seeing the screen, something along those lines, please use the chat function. We will not be able to address any non-technical questions, meaning questions about tonight's session, if they are submitted to the chat function. That is for the Q&A function. Also to let everyone know that tonight's meeting was announced to the press and there may be members of the media present. And again, finally, I want to remind you one last time that tonight's session is being recorded. And with that, we are ready to begin. I'm going to turn it over to Ellen Lapointe, the Chief Executive Officer of New Hampshire Hospital. Ellen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jake. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ellen. Thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you to the panelists who are joining us as well. So let's get started. This is the fourth of our community outreach meetings for the forensic hospital for New Hampshire Hospital. So let me jump into the agenda. So tonight's agenda, we're going to be seeing the forensic hospital design and construction timeline. For those of you that have been at previous sessions, this is a familiar slide that we will update this evening on the project's progress. We'll also be talking about highlights from the last 3 information sessions, where to find recordings of each of the previous public outreach sessions, as well as where the recording will be for this evening's session as well, who you can contact with any questions about the forensic hospital, when the next meeting will occur. You'll see a blue star next to that item because we have added an additional meeting in the fall of 2022. So you'll see that in a moment in the timeline. As well as Jake mentioned, we'll be taking questions about any questions that anyone has this evening. So here's our forensic hospital design and construction timeline. You can see that we are right here where the red star is. That indicates we are at 6/30/2022 this evening, and this is our 4th public outreach meeting. In the previous version of this timeline, we had the next meeting occurring in the spring of 2023. So I'll orient us a bit to this slide. You can see that in this orange bar here are the years. And then directly under that are the months within those years. In the design phase swim lane of this slide, you can see where we've traveled throughout the duration of this project so far. You can see that in in fall of 2021, we had our design firm selection. We had to go to GNC approval for that design firm. We went through program verification and schematic design in the spring, winter and spring of 2022. And now where we're at currently is our design development phase of the project. And then underneath, of course, are the yellow circles to tell you the different public outreach meetings that we had so far. And again, back to orienting us to this evening's meeting. And as I previously mentioned, we added an additional meeting in the fall of 2022, and that will take us to basically the year mark of the outreach that we've had regarding this project. So we felt it important to have another meeting prior to the previously scheduled meeting that we had occurring in the spring of 2023. So just to take us forward a bit more into the spring of 2023 and into the winter, of 2022 first, we're going to be doing bidding for the construction company. Of course, that also requires governor and council approval. And then into the spring of 2023 is when we'll be performing construction with the hope of the spring or summer of 2024 to have move in to the newly constructed facility. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about some of the previous sessions tonight, really just to reorient folks to the sessions that have occurred prior to this and share some brief additional information in this evening's session as well. So you might remember if you attended, and if not, we're glad you're here tonight, regarding the outreach session that occurred on October 7th of 2021. And the items that were covered in that session were why we were constructing a forensic hospital and why there's a need for a forensic hospital in New Hampshire. So to remind folks, currently in New Hampshire, there's no facility appropriate for treating acutely mentally ill patients here in New Hampshire for the forensic population. In regards to the current environment, it's such that they are being cared for at the Secure Psychiatric Unit, or SPU, at the Men's State Prison currently. There's some treatment of forensic patients occurring here at New Hampshire Hospital, but the design of New Hampshire Hospital is such that it really is focused on short-term acute psychiatric care. And the primary process for forensic patients typically requires longer lengths of stay. Of course, in alignment with the state's 10-year mental health plan, it really recommends improvements to mental health treatment for those involved in the criminal justice system. And of course, efficiencies in shared services with New Hampshire Hospital, that really speaks to having the forensic hospital attached to New Hampshire Hospital so that we can have shared services and efficiency with the process, but also creating a safe and appropriate environment for the population. So our construction process, our design and construction process, you may remember from the previous session that we are working on building a 24-bed facility, and it's going to be adjacent to New Hampshire Hospital. Our approach and our timeline, how the architectural firm was selected. So that was a process that we went through that was called the state's request for proposal, or RFP process. And how a construction company will be selected, that really speaks to the state's bidding process that we'll be going through when we have a construction company, construction companies that are expressing their interest in supporting this project. And then of course, in this first session, we talked about next steps, which took us into the outreach session number 2, which occurred on January 31st, 2022. In that session, we talked about, of course, the forensic hospital design and construction timeline, which you previously saw at the beginning of this slide deck. We also talked about an overview of forensic hospital patient population, and we can review that again this evening. So patients involved in the criminal justice system and who are suffering from a serious mental illness. Patients also accused of an unlawful act, but cannot go to trial because of their illness. Patients who have been found not guilty of the unlawful act, but because the act was a result of their illness. And patients who have not committed an unlawful act, but because of their mental illness are too dangerous to be treated at a conventional psychiatric hospital. A continuation of our second outreach session, the forensic programs in New Hampshire, what the current state is right now, and that still remains to be the case. As we previously mentioned, the Secure Psychiatric Unit, as well as we do have forensic patients who are currently residing at New Hampshire Hospital. The forensic patient care best practices, we talked about those best practices, including but not limited to daily and weekly assessments with doctors and nurses, psychiatric medications, individual and or group therapy sessions, and groups that focus on things like mental illness, substance abuse, stress and anxiety management and coping, as well as social and interpersonal skills. The forensic programs in New Hampshire future state look like therapies specific to the needs of the forensic patients and population, Treatment of the forensic population will be overseen and provided by trained mental health professionals in a hospital setting rather than the current state, which is in a correction setting. Much like at New Hampshire Hospital, security will be provided by safety professionals specifically trained in mental health centered approaches. And that took us forward to outreach session number 3 that occurred on March 28th, 2022. So earlier this year. Again, we saw that forensic hospital design and construction timeline swim lane document. We talked about the design update from SMRT, our architect firm. They showed us and reminded us of what our goals are in this project, which include efficiency, community safety, direct visitors to a single front door, preserving and enhancing the existing site, minimizing disruptions to the community as well as to everyday operations of the facility, creating a clear future intent, and obtaining broad stakeholder input. And that last goal really is why we're here tonight and have continued to have these outreach sessions. Of course, we responded to several questions as we've done in every session, but we also saw several views of the property and proposed locations for the forensic facility in outreach session number 3. We also talked about how there is a parking study as well as a traffic study being performed in relation to this project, but also across the campus to maintain efficiencies. We also saw examples of psychiatric forensic facilities in other communities. And SMRT and Architecture Plus did a really nice job of showing facilities and communities that have a lot of similarities to what we have here in Concord. Outreach session number 4 is this evening session, and we wanted to orient folks a little bit more to where they could find the recordings of each of these public outreach sessions. So I'll take you to the DHHS website in a moment, and I can orient folks to where to look on the website. I also included a lane here that folks can utilize when they go on the website, and this is how to find the forensic facility presentations, but there are a couple of easier ways as opposed to this specific pathway right here. So though a couple of easier ways are listed below. You can search the site at the top of the page above the logo, or which I'll be showing you in a moment, you can scroll to the bottom of the main page and there's a listing of what's new at DHHS. And I put a blue star next to that because that is a new way to be able to access this information on the DHHS website. I also included this evening who you can contact with any questions about the forensic hospital. That mailbox outreach is not new. It's been an outreach opportunity that's existed since the beginning of this project. That mailbox is checked Monday through Friday, and we work very hard at responding as close to immediately as possible, but we just ask folks give us 24 to 48 hours business days so that we can respond appropriately if certain folks are out or if it requires a little bit more outreach to answer the question that's asked within that mailbox. So the next session that would be upcoming, as I mentioned, in the fall of 2022, I wanted to let folks know that we are very much on schedule in regards to this project. We are moving right along appropriately in regards to all the work that we've done so far and throughout the design and development phase of the project, which we're in currently. Again, we added another session in the fall of 2022, and that's really our intent of trying to continue to stay connected to the community and answer any questions and be a committed community partner throughout this project. We're also going to be showing you in that fall outreach session more design specific information and hope to be able to show you some visual design renderings in our partnership with our architect, SMRT. Some of you that were on the previous 3rd session were able to see some different renderings, and we hope to be able to give you a little bit more detail in the upcoming session in the fall. Of course, we'll be showing you again that timeline and that swim lane document that you saw at the beginning of this presentation, as well as at the beginning of the prior presentations, and give you some updates on upcoming construction. And lastly, of course, we'll be taking audience questions as we always do. So that leads us to the last slide for this evening, which is our opportunity for questions and answers.
Ellen, this is Ted. Could you take the folks through the DHHS website page to show them the link?
Thank you so much. I forgot to do that. I apologize for that. So thank you, Ted. Let me take you through to the DHHS website right now. So I'm clicking on this link. And in order to find the DHHS website at home, you can type in Google or at your search engine, you can type in DHHS New Hampshire or DHHS. You'll be able to find us very quickly and easily on any search engine. So this is the DHHS website for Department of Health and Human Services for New Hampshire. As I mentioned, you can search the site right up here at the top. I hope you can see my cursor here, but there's a search the site right at the top of the page, and you can type in forensic hospital, New Hampshire hospital, anything that really kind of orients you to this project. I also mentioned that you can follow a couple of steps to be able to find us, and I'll just orient you briefly to that as well. You can see here programs and services, and you will be able to find New Hampshire Hospital. I'm sorry, you want to actually go to About DHHS, and you can find New Hampshire Hospital under Locations and Facilities, and that will take you to the New Hampshire Hospital page, which will get you to this forensic hospital page as well. But let me go all the way to the bottom of the screen where it was previously mentioned what's new at DHHS. Down here is the proposed forensic hospital information sessions. So this is the page where the information linked to tonight's webinar is stored and will be stored for upcoming sessions as well. It gives you some other alternatives to be able to dial in or to choose the link to watch the presentation. And then you can see down all the way at the bottom here, they're slightly out of order, but you can see the previous sessions that occurred. Oh, no, they're not. Sorry about that. So the very bottom is the October 7th, 2021 session. You'll also be able to click on the slide presentations for each of the sessions, and or you can click on the YouTube video that has the recording for each of the sessions. Thank you, Ted, for reorienting me to that. Okay. So questions? Let me just stop sharing here.
Thank you, Ellen. And before we do dive into the questions, thank you for that thorough presentation. You know, at least one panelist is having issues with seeing the slideshow. I wish I had the technological skills to help you out here. Kathy, if you have a suggestion, I'm open to it, but I do want everyone to know that the slide deck that Ellen just walked everyone through will be posted on the DHHS website tomorrow morning, along with this recording. So anyone who was unable to view the PowerPoint presentation tonight will be able to get to it tomorrow morning. Again, our apologies if you did have any technological issues. Those seem to be the norm these days. But with that being said, let me dive into our questions. Several have already put in there some questions, but please use the Q&A function if you do have questions. Let me go straight to the first one. What is the purpose of this meeting? Can community residents and their input potentially affect the forensic unit project, or is this strictly informational?
So I can take that. So yes, the community can have an impact and a voice on this project. That is why we have been having these information sessions to really have community outreach, to have a level of understanding as to what's important to you in the community. But yes, they also are informational to keep folks up to date as to where we're at in the timeline and what to expect moving forward around things like construction and anything that's happening on the campus that may impact you as a neighbor.
Thank you. Okay. Next question, the comment, I think. It might be a question in here, but I welcome anyone who wants to chime in on it. I just want to share my support for moving the SPU to the New Hampshire Hospital campus. I also live on Warren Street, less than a mile from the proposed location. I was a long-term attorney at Disabilities Rights Center and visited the SPU many times. Passing through the razor wire, the bleak corridors, locked doors, mandatory prison jumpsuits for the patients transferred from the general population, so intimidating and inappropriate for persons dealing with mental illness. My only concern is that the ease of transferring persons from New Hampshire Hospital when the SPU moves to the campus may result in some civilly committed patients being transferred more readily to a more restrictive setting than their illness requires. Again, great work in closing the SPU at the prison. I think Ellen and or New Hampshire Hospital folks, do you have any comments on that?
I just wanted to add to that. Thank you. That's I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of that comment. And I really think that that's exactly the mission that we're trying to create here, is having folks, you know, who have a mental illness be in more of a treatment setting, in a hospital setting, as opposed to a correction setting. So I appreciate that. I also just wanted to hit on the concern that you noted, and I wanted to express that we do plan on having some detailed conversation and processes in place around who's being admitted into the forensic hospital. All of that is forthcoming and can be shared in some upcoming sessions. We touched on that a little bit at session number 2, outreach session number 2, which I encourage folks to view if you haven't already participated in that. But know that decisions will be made thoroughly and appropriately around the patient population at the forensic hospital.
Thank you. Follow-up question from the first attendee. Where can I get copies of the project plans? Either a link of copies or documents, things like building site, architectural plans, ingress and egress, parking lot, history of the projects, and other sites researched. Ted, thank you.
Well, right now we're developing those plans, so there isn't a lot to share. What we do have in some of the previous sessions is some of our conceptual plans. And if you go back to those previous sessions and review the slide decks for those sessions, you'll see the progress of the design from site selection, all the way up to where we are right now, which again is the very beginning of the design phase of the project. As Ellen mentioned before, the next session, we're planning to show you some renderings, 3-dimensional renderings of the new facility. And those renderings will show, the building, the entrance, they'll show parking, and show fencing. It'll show the whole facility. But again, we're at the very beginning stages right now. And we're very excited about being able to share that information for you. Information about the parking study and the traffic study will be available when those are completed. Those are, the traffic study data collection has been completed, but the study is not yet available to us. And the parking study is ongoing right now. Jake?
Thank you, Ted. Okay, next question. This is a repeat of the question I emailed earlier. You're referring to this project as a forensic psychiatric hospital. What about non-forensic patients? My understanding is that the Penitentiary Annex's SPU has sometimes been used to house patients who have never been involved in potentially criminal behavior, but instead were involuntarily committed for their own safety or that of others. Additionally, the SPU has housed females in the men's penitentiary. Yes, I understand that there is a door between the SPU and the penitentiary, and the women are housed separately from the men. Will these practices be stopped once this new facility is operational?
So I can take a shot at that one, and I might ask for some help from either Dr. Muschette or Dr. Lampagnano. But it's my understanding that the SPU will still be in existence once the forensic hospital is built. It's such that the patients that are currently residing in the forensic hospital who meet admission criteria to be admitted into our newly built forensic hospital will be the patients that will move from the SPU into New Hampshire Hospital's forensic hospital. But that won't encompass the entirety of the patients and the clientele who are currently residing in the SPU. Dr. Eller or Dr. Muschette, anything that I missed there?
I don't believe so, Ellen. Very similar to what you said, the SPU will remain, and we will be housing, civilly committed and forensic patients within the forensic hospital.
Okay, thank you. Next question, the former Laconia State School is available for redevelopment. It's sited on 225 acres. Additionally, a new men's prison is to be built in the near future, which will leave the building vacant as well. Why aren't either of these sites being considered? They already exist and clearly are designed for institutional use. Additionally, both provide for extensive parking and outside areas for the residents. Ted, maybe you want to start on that one?
Yeah, I will take a shot at that one, Jake. Thank you. As I understand it, the Laconia facility is slated for resale. The state is not interested in redeveloping that site. They're interested in selling it. The men's prison, while there is talk of a new men's prison, that's many years down the road. That process has not even begun yet. And I believe that the purpose of this new forensic hospital is to move those patients that are in a prison environment into a hospital environment, which is the key element of the forensic hospital. And if you've ever been in the existing men's prison, it needs a lot of work. That's why we're planning on building a new one.
Thank you, Ted. Okay, next question. Recently, there was a letter to the editor in the Concord Monitor. Two things it cited were, it will have a razor wall. Is this true? I don't recall that being mentioned in previous public meetings. Current armed guards at the prison area will not transfer to New Hampshire Hospital, but new social workers would be hired. New Hampshire Hospital's limited present security will be shared. Is this true? If so, how can this possibly be a safe environment considering huge worker shortages?
So a couple different questions there, and I'll try to take them in order. And again, just reach out to other panelists if you have anything further to add. So in regards to razor wire, that's not something that we currently have here at New Hampshire Hospital. We are working with the architecture around how to really integrate this enhanced security for the forensic population into the framework and current structure of what we have here at New Hampshire Hospital, and really have that not only be safe and secure, but also integrative into what we currently have as a facility, and really wanting that to be appealing to the eye as well as safe and secure for the population. So if that means we have to have some razor wire, that may be the case from a safety perspective, but if it can be avoided, I can assure you that would be our preference as well. In regards to current armed guards, so yes, we do intend to hire new social workers. Yes, we do intend to hire additional security folks. It's not such that we intend to not add any additional security staff. We realize and understand that that will be a necessity to be able to care for this population. That may mean that some of our current security services grow in size. It will look like additional training and resources provided to the security staff who support that portion of the facility. But please know, we don't intend to maintain status quo, that we do intend to really enhance and add to our services in order to safely care for the population. In regards to worker shortages, yes, that's a reality that we're all facing across the board, most especially in healthcare right now. And we do intend to do everything we can in a safe and appropriate way in order to meet the needs of this population. So we would really want to ensure that we have the appropriate workforce, not only trained, but also, of course, in place prior to opening the facility.
Okay, and this is a related question, so I'm just going to bump it up in the queue. Just for clarification, is razor wire in the architectural design?
No, not currently.
Thank you. Next question. Has it been established where parking will be built and or located?
I can take that one, Jay. So as we'd mentioned before, we're performing a parking study, and the parking study is campus-wide. We want to establish what the overall parking capacity at the South Office Park is, so that we can minimize any new surface parking that might have to be built for this particular facility. Again, that parking study is still underway. We don't have the answers yet about what the capacity is at the South Office Park, but we suspect that there is capacity there, which would then result in less surface parking being built for this particular facility. The idea with the parking is to try to minimize any new surface parking, or try to build the absolute minimum that we have to for this particular facility.
Thank you, Ted. Question, this is, I think, for Ellen. Staffing is such an issue right now, and it seems for the foreseeable future. The plan calls for sharing resources with current New Hampshire hospital staff. Is that possible in the current environment?
In the current environment, no, as to where we stand at today. But some of this, that we're talking about is clinical staff, but it's also operational staff that we have, let's say, in food and nutrition or dietary or laundry. And that is a little bit more feasible in current state to be able to absorb an additional forensic hospital at 24 beds with some of those other non-clinical services. It's primarily clinical services that we would really need to be able to enhance our staffing. I'm thankful that we have some time here in the next couple of years, year and a half or so, to be able to get to that point and really work hard at recruiting staff to be able to meet that clinical need. So I guess the answer to that question is partially yes when it comes to operations, but no when it comes to clinical resources currently. And that's why we're committed to finding those resources going forward.
Thank you, Ellen. Has there been further discussion on how it will be determined who will be housed at the SPU, New Hampshire Hospital, the new hospital? Is it likely to be by commitment type or acuity or dangerousness?
Dr. Mouchette, can you help me with that one? I'll just start us off by saying that we do intend to have more of those very detail-oriented conversations as we move forward, but I'll ask Dr. Mouchette or Dr. Lampignano to help in regards to commitment type.
Yes, I believe we'll have different commitment types, whether they're civilly committed, whether they're not guilty by reason reason of insanity, if they are high acuity and are dangerous, then that will be it'll be used they will be housed in the forensic hospital, in a therapeutic environment to get them stable and to get them well. Do you have
Thank you,
anything to add, Dr. L?
Yeah, I would just, reemphasize again that the SPEW is going to still exist. And SPEW is going to continue to meet the needs of the prison population as it does in part now. So we're not going to try to replace SPEW. What we're going to try to do is take those folks who haven't been convicted of a crime and bring them out of the prison system. I think it's helpful to think about the new forensic hospital as just another tool in the toolbox, right? That it's going to be able to provide higher security. It's going to be able to provide a higher degree of safety. And so that those patients who are going there, who need that kind of safety and also that kind of programming, because it's going to have a different kind of programming, not just safer programming, but specific programming to the needs of certain populations. That resource is going to be available for that patient population. The exact ins and outs, the exact details of how all that's going to work still needs to be worked out. But in general, just think about it as another tool in the toolkit for New Hampshire Hospital to deliver the appropriate care to different patient populations.
Thank you all. What other forensic hospitals that this project is being modeled, is this project being modeled after in terms of clients and hospital setting?
Becca, I'm wondering if you can help me answer that question as far as some of the work that SMRT has previously done. But I do want to assure you that we've taken a look at several different forensic facilities, and really facilities that meet the same type of footprint that we have here in Concord regarding our neighborhood setting here, and really the proximity to other resources in our community, here in Concord. So Becca, can you help me with that one a little bit?
Well, I would suggest looking at the previous session, because we did share some visuals and some slides for a number of other hospitals that are, many of which were also a combination of forensic patients and a psychiatric hospital. And so I think that's probably the best place to go to really look at what those are. So those are some good case studies, and we tried to find those that had similarities in sort of the location in relation to the community. But I would definitely encourage people to go back to those resources to take a look at those, and know that as we're talking about and the design here, you can also see sort of where on the site we are looking to put this addition, but then also that we're being sensitive to that and trying to work through how we can best enhance this site while meeting the program needs of this forensic hospital.
Becca, this is Ted. Can you give the audience an idea of approximately how many forensic hospital projects SMRT and Architecture Plus has worked on in the past? I mean, just a ballpark.
Yeah, it's in the, for us, we're more in New England, so a handful, but our partner Architecture Plus, and actually someone's online here, I don't know the number, but for them it's, in the dozens anyhow, of projects similar to this. And so, which is part of why we've had that partnership, just for the broadest experience that we could bring to the project.
And Becca, that's not only here in New England, but across the country, correct?
Correct, across North America.
Thank you. Next question. What if there are more than 24 patients at the SPU and the new hospital only has beds for 24? What will happen to the remaining patients? How soon is additional building being considered, since clearly the full 60 beds will be needed sooner rather than later?
So I can take a shot at that one to start us off. So we really hope to work on, obviously, working with this patient population and really hoping, to help them be well and be able to return to their community settings that they reside in. So we're hopeful that although forensic patients tend to have longer lengths of stay than patients at New Hampshire Hospital currently, that we will still have a rotation of available beds for additional forensic patients to be able to utilize as they need. It is such that if someone's in the forensic portion of New Hampshire Hospital and they meet criteria to step down into the regular portion of New Hampshire Hospital, that's still something that we would consider doing, of course, as well, so that we can open up a bed in the forensic facility for someone who might have a more acute need at that point in time. In regards to any additional resources beyond that, I'm unsure at this point in time. I think that might still have a utilization of SPU, but again, that's really the goal of this project, is to avoid having mentally ill individuals in the corrections setting. In regards to the 60 beds, I can't speak to what that timeline looks like, but I know that there have been studies. The number of 60 is referring to studies and information that we've previously shared around what the full need may look like. At this point, we are focusing on the 24 beds, but in working with SMRT, they are a great partner in how an additional unit might look like on the campus to get us up to a 60 bed number if and when that becomes a possibility financially.
Thank you, Ellen. And I have I'm just going to jump up a clarifying question in the queue, just to be as requested. Still not clear. Simply stated, will women continue to be housed at the SPU? And I don't know if this is the crew that can answer that, maybe to the best of our abilities, but that might be a DOC question.
Dre, go ahead.
Yes, the SPU does house women there, and they are housed on a separate unit. And just like similar to New Hampshire Hospital, all of our units are co-ed units, per safety, as well as the forensic hospital will be as well.
Thank you, Doctor. Okay, next question. I think this is an account of a personal experience. I am fully in support of the SPU moving to New Hampshire Hospital. I was a patient 6 times at this SPU and saw firsthand in the prison setting, and this was very hard for me. It made my mental illness harder to deal with. Also, once this is approved, will the SPU and the men's prison be closed for good? Well, I think the last question has been answered. It will still have a purpose. But I think that the new facility is designed to ensure that individuals never have to go through be in that situation again. And thank you very much for sharing your experience. Our next question is, will there be a needs assessment completed to determine the requirement? All right, I think this has kind of been addressed. I read that it is for 60 beds, yet the plan is for 24 beds. Where will the vast majority of patients be housed and treated? I don't know, Ellen, if you feel like there's anything there you haven't addressed.
So yes, there were several assessments completed to determine the need for upwards of 60 beds. We were financially approved to pursue 24 beds at this time. And I'm not sure I understand the last portion of the question regarding where will the vast majority of patients be housed and treated. So the 24 patients will be housed and treated within the newly built addition to New Hampshire Hospital, which will be the secure forensic facility. And then, of course, New Hampshire Hospital's operations will remain intact for additional beds as well.
Thank you, Ellen. I just want everyone to know that any question that you put into the Q&A will be addressed by this panel before we can conclude tonight. There's a couple of repeat questions coming in, which is fine. It makes my life a little more difficult, but that's not a problem. But I just want you to know that if you put it in once, it will be asked. You don't have to put it in more than once. And if I'm wrong about that, ping me. Next question. I abut the property. I am 200 yards from the proposed site. This will greatly affect my property and lower my value. The state is not notifying me or reaching out to me in any way and refusing to send me documents. This is wrong. Please help me. I need specific documents about this project.
I can handle that. So for this particular person, we have received your request for information. We're treating it as a right to know request, and we have a right to know request coordinator at DAS that has contacted you and asked you for more specific information. When we receive that, we'll start the process of providing that specific information to you.
Thank you, Ted. All right. There's another question here. I may clarify that SPU is not closing. I think we have already addressed that. And the population that expected to be there, which patients will remain in the prison, that I feel like has been addressed. Yes. Gray just did that. Thank you, Doctor. Will the patients be taken out and back for some services? Oh, okay. Will they be taken from the property for community into the community for services and back? If so, what kind of security features will be at that entrance exit? And will this be the same entrance exit that visitors use? I don't know if we know that all yet.
I don't think we know that all yet. But again, we're working right now really at the kind of detail oriented phase of design so that we can create the most safe and efficient flow of operations for the facility, not only for the staff, but of course for the patients as well. Yes, there is a potential that patients need to be taken out into the community for services. That's something that occurs right now for New Hampshire hospital patients, which includes forensic patients that we have here currently. And when that's the case, there are appropriate safety measures taken to be able to escort them safely and appropriately in the community.
And I'll add that currently we're looking at a separate intake for patients and separate entrance for everyone else. So visitors would still go to a single entrance at New Hampshire Hospital and enter New Hampshire Hospital, which would then connect to the forensic hospital, and visitors would be able to make their way to the forensic hospital through New Hampshire Hospital. But the patient intake will be separate. It won't be at the main entrance of the hospital.
Thank you all. Our next question, what concerns are there about constant flooding in this area? This is a serious drawback. This is a flooding zone.
I'll take that one. So there definitely any new construction for the building or additional parking that we might need, we'll have to do a drainage study for that, and we'll have to assess what the runoff conditions are going to be. And we recognize that there are areas of the South Office Park that have some drainage problems. And we've been working with the city for at least a couple of years on this. And we're not planning to make the situation worse. Again, we're in the very beginning stages of the design, and we'll be able to report on this a little bit more as the design progresses.
Thank you, Ted. Will community resources be needed and utilized to serve these patients?
Yes, potentially, but we are working at really trying to have as many resources within the forensic facility as possible to meet the patient's needs.
Thank you, Ellen. Will the laws be changed to prevent the state from sending non-convicted persons to the SPU?
I don't know the answer to that question at this point in time, but I'd imagine that yes, we will need to be looking at current laws and how how they impact this project and what that will look like moving forward.
Thank you, Ellen. Do you think you have sufficient dollars to build the hospital based on construction costs, or will you have to go back to the legislature for additional funding? Your timeline is such, any problem with funding will likely delay the project.
So I'll take a shot at this one. We're certainly in an interesting environment economically with supply chain issues, employment issues with contractors. But the idea here is to build a 24-bed facility within the budget that we have right now. There's not a plan to go back to ask for additional funding. And we believe that we can stay on the current timeline that we're on right now. One of the reasons that we've added the additional meeting in the early fall is so that we can finalize what the building is going to actually look like and present that to you. And that building that we present to you will be within that budgeted funding that we have right now.
Thank you, Ted. I know that some Department of Corrections and New Hampshire hospital staff are very concerned this will have a negative impact on New Hampshire hospital staff and patients. How can they have input?
Great question. So we have been communicating readily with New Hampshire hospital staff. We have a communication system here within the hospital that we work really hard at having outreach to our staff to keep them abreast of any projects that are occurring or any changes that might be coming their way, both you know, from an internal under New Hampshire hospital roof, or you know, in regards to things of this nature that are a little bit more of a broad scope. Anyone is welcome to join these outreach sessions, whether it be Department of Corrections staff, New Hampshire hospital staff. We welcome anyone to be able to utilize this as a forum to be able to ask their questions or express concerns if they have them. But also from a New Hampshire hospital perspective, as well as a statewide perspective, we've had several conversations around how we can increase our outreach to interested parties. In New Hampshire hospital in particular, we plan on having a question and answer session in the coming weeks, similar to the format of these sessions, but a little bit more specific to New Hampshire hospital staff and what this might mean to them in the future. And we've also had conversations at the commissioner's office level around how we can outreach to other facets of not only the Department of Health and Human Services, but also across the state to other state departments to be able to ensure that they can ask any questions or express any concerns as well. So we're very committed to not only working with the community, but also within New Hampshire Hospital and across the state to be able to have good partnership and outreach.
Thank you, Ellen. Might the building increase to 40 or 60 beds? Ellen, you have addressed that question.
Yes, potentially.
Yes. For a previous question, so those patients who have been convicted will still be housed in the SPU, and those not convicted would be at the forensic hospital. Is that correct? That has been addressed. Is it fair to say that aside from current residents of the New Hampshire Men's State Prison who suffer from severe mental illness, who have been convicted, not guilty by reason of insanity, it will be all of the same commitment types with attention to appropriateness of the setting for each individual? Sorry, that has also been addressed unless the doctors feel they have anything additional to add there. Okay. Are any other of the facilities, I think that SMRT or others have been involved with, within 200 yards of homes and less than a half mile from preschools?
Question. Yes, so some of the facilities that we took a look at within the third presentation, so the previous one just prior to this, were of similar structure in community-based settings to ours here in Concord.
Thanks, Ellen. Has there been consideration given to enhancements at the SPU to meet accreditation requirements? Shouldn't that be done regardless, given 60% will remain there?
I'm not able to answer that question.
Yeah, that would be a question, I think, for the Department of Corrections. And we can take that to them. Just a note, I want to thank all of the panelists and others who are working on this project while needed. Thank you for that. The proposed build is immediately adjacent to Bow Brook. Ducks and blue heron are in this area. Bow Brook enters into the Turkey Pond watershed. What studies have been done on this?
Can you repeat that one, Jake?
Sure. The proposed build is immediately adjacent to Bow Brook. Ducks and blue heron are in this area. Bow Brook enters into the Turkey River watershed. What studies have been done on this? I think an environmental impact study.
Gee, thanks for that question. That's a good one. I'm not sure that we have looked at that, but that's certainly something that we will bring up with our consultants and take a look at.
Good question. Thank you, Ted. Why have no alternative sites even been considered? Sites with no adverse impact on hospital staff and patients, sites in non-residential areas or areas with less residential proximity, sites more economical, such as Sununu Center in Manchester, sites without the water issues of the hospital, sites not requiring new construction. Well, I would point out that New Hampshire, the facility in Sununu in Manchester, where Sununu Center is for youth only. So that wouldn't have been an option, but.
Ted, you're muted.
Go ahead, Ted. You're still muted, Ted.
Thank you, Jake.
There we go.
And I believe that the Sununu Center in Manchester is slated for demolition eventually. This happens to be a very appropriate site because of its relationship to New Hampshire Hospital. This particular setting, the South Office Park, has been a psychiatric treatment center, if you will, for over 100 years. And it continues to be. It never stopped being a treatment center. And as Ellen mentioned earlier, there are certain efficiencies that we gain by building a facility, this new facility, the forensic hospital, adjacent to New Hampshire Hospital.
Agreed. It really will help us be able to streamline services and support, mostly from a non-clinical perspective around, like I said, things like food and nutrition, laundry. Really, those services are able to readily absorb additional 24 beds. So it makes a lot of sense to be able to have those economies of scale.
Thank you, Ellen and Ted. Have immediate abutters been notified and offered compensation for diminished value of their properties?
I believe we've made a serious attempt at notifying all the abutters that surround the entire South Office Park and that are adjacent to the facility, even if you're across the street. But there's been no discussion and no direction for offering any kind of compensation.
Thank you, Ted. I think as you pointed out earlier, that this campus has had this type of service, these types of mental health facilities for well over 100 years. All right, and There may be a few more questions that come in, but I do see that we're joined by Susan Stearns with NAMI New Hampshire, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the New Hampshire chapter. And, I think we get a lot of commentary from our perspective as we're building this site or considering building on this site, and a lot of feedback from abutters, all of which is really helpful. But I think hearing from someone in Susan's position who can speak to the issue statewide and the need, I think if I could ask Susan to say a few words that she might be willing to share. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Jake. I'm Susan Stearns. I'm the Executive Director at NAMI New Hampshire. And I first of all want to thank everyone at New Hampshire Hospital, the department, for all your efforts to bring this forward, and certainly the support from policymakers in the state in order to move this project forward. We recognize that, I come to this work because I have a family member living with a serious mental illness. And I also have had the opportunity to sit with families who have had loved ones who would be part of this population. And recognize that these are some of the folks who are most ill amongst those living with mental illness. And we have really, we have a lot to do in order to ensure that they are receiving the best, most appropriate treatment in the least restrictive settings possible for them. Many of these folks may have refused or not had effective treatment in the past. Many of them, we know, have done things that we find very abhorrent and frightening. However, they are also some of the most marginalized folks in our society with extremely negative attitudes towards them. And they're frequently not able to speak for themselves or really advocate for themselves. Many of them have, families who have trouble advocating for them. Sometimes that's because they may be estranged from their families because their behaviors have been challenging through the years. Sometimes it can be that they have committed acts of violence towards their family members. But most of them have families who love them. They have families who are grieving the loss of the hopes and dreams that they had for their children, for their brothers, their sisters, their mothers, and their fathers. And before this severe mental illness and the aftermath of it dashed those dreams. Many of those families think the system has failed their loved ones, that they have not been able to access timely treatment or appropriate treatment, or been discharged prematurely from treatment in the past. So I just really am very grateful that this project is moving forward. We know from other states that the modern treatments and the types of things that will be offered at this facility can truly create better outcomes for folks, indeed promote recovery and opportunities for a full life in the community, which is something that we as a society really owe to these folks. These are our children, they are our brothers and sisters, our mothers and our fathers, and we have a duty to care for them. And often I think, as someone who has walked this walk for a number of years in terms of caring for my family member living with a serious mental illness, there but for the grace of God go I, that I have not had to be in this position of visiting a family member at the secure psychiatric unit. So thank you all so much. Truly grateful on behalf of the folks that we serve.
Thank you, Susan. That was really powerful. I appreciate it. I do see, let's see, we've got a few more questions coming in. One more question, at least. Has there been any historical building within the state South Office Park area that had razor wire walls and maximum security issues?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Ellen.
And again, I'll add that, right now we're not looking at razor wire. We're looking at something that we're looking at containment that that we think the surrounding neighborhood will appreciate.
Thank you, Ted. Okay. Well, those are the questions that have been entered into. Oh, no. Okay. Sorry. Let's see. I want to make sure you understand that we all agree these people need services. The concern is the location in near homes and schools, and is razor wire a possibility? Thank you. We appreciate your concerns. Those have been come through clear in each of these sessions. And I think all we're trying to do is provide as best answers as best we can to address your concerns. At this point in the process, we are still a long way out. So some of the issues or some of the things you'd like to know, unfortunately, we just don't know at this time, but we will continue to keep having these sessions and providing updates as soon as we have them to give everyone as much practical information as they can.
And Jake,
yeah, go ahead,
Jake,
Ted.
I might add that we're sensitive to the surrounding neighborhoods. We don't want to design and construct a facility that will be unpleasant to look at, that will be unsafe as far as the neighbors are concerned. Something that will fit into the community. That's our goal. And that's the primary reason why we're having these outreach sessions. We hear you loud and clear. You don't want razor wire. We don't want that either. So thank you for your participation in the outreach sessions. It means a lot to us to hear some of your concerns, because we want to roll that into whatever design we come up with.
Thank you, Ted. I appreciate that. And then another follow-up, I'm all in favor of moving this population out of the prison system, but as an abutter, I'm concerned about encroachment and future expansion as the facility expands over the years. New Hampshire Hospital does not seem to think of us sometimes when grounds are concerned, with things like constant mowing, cutting up several trees and not replacing, noise, etc. I encourage anyone else to chime in. I know from my own experience, can't really blame New Hampshire Hospital for that. That would be, that's the state in general that does the mowing and any work on trees and things like that. And as a former abutter myself, I understand the concern with cutting of trees.
And I can assure you that we're working very hard at preserving the beautiful landscape that we have here. It's very important to us as staff as well. It's things that we really like to utilize throughout our day to be able to get outside and see the trees and see the landscape. So please know that that's definitely being taken into consideration as this project continues to evolve.
I was actually thinking today as I drove through the campus how much I'm looking forward to coming down here on Monday to be able to see the fireworks from Memorial Field. It's a wonderful place to see the fireworks. A big lawn. All right, well, thank you all. Thanks to panelists for participating, for Susan Stearns for joining us. Thank you so much. And for all the attendees for your great questions and your interest in this project. We will be back in the fall to give you a further update, but I did put the from Ellen's PowerPoint, how to access previous presentations and how to send an email, the appropriate email address to send with questions, so that if things come up before we're back, you have a means to get your concerns addressed. And again, tonight's recording and slide presentation will be up on the DHHS website tomorrow morning. With that, I say goodbye to everybody, and I wish you all a wonderful summer and a happy 4th of July. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake.